One shouldn't have to defend traditional Chinese medicine using Western medicine's logic and theories. That's not the way to go. Traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine are like two completely different sciences. The arguments between traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine have happened several times in modern Chinese history, and they were based on real-life clinical practices. Let's take the common cold as an example. Western medicine may prescribe certain medications that can cure the cold in a few days. On the other hand, traditional Chinese medicine uses different medications to treat the cold faster and with more effective results. Traditional Chinese medicine practitioners take pride in this accomplishment. This ongoing debate stems from the fact that Western medicine can do things that traditional Chinese medicine cannot. As a philosopher, I've also paid attention to this difference between traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine. I've approached the understanding of their relationship from a philosophical perspective. What's the situation like today? We have to admit that China's history of learning from the West has been a game changer when it comes to introducing Western medicine. It has truly been a blessing for the Chinese people, solving numerous problems. Let's take a simple example. In the past, childbirth was a risky business for women, with the constant fear of complications and life-threatening situations. But thanks to Western medicine, this issue has been tackled head-on. We now have the option of cesarean sections, regardless of the fetus's position. Western medicine made this possible. Did traditional Chinese medicine leave it up to fate? We have to acknowledge this point. One big breakthrough in Western medicine is the discovery of antibiotics, like penicillin. These drugs have totally changed the game when it comes to surgeries. Without antibiotics, surgeries would be a no-go. Even the Chinese, like the famous Dr. Huatua, 3rd century CE, have tried their hand at surgeries, but the risk of bacterial infections was always a big worry. Imagine going through a surgery only to end up with a nasty infection. That's why antibiotics are so important. They've allowed Western medicine to make huge strides in surgical techniques and medical treatments. I'm 67 now, and when I was 57, I lost a bunch of teeth. Let me tell you, my parents' generation had it rough. Once their teeth fell out, they had to deal with those darn dentures. Man, those things were uncomfortable. They would pop out while eating, and it was a real hassle. But now, I've got 4 fancy artificial dental implants in my mouth, and guess what? I can even chow down on some crabs. It's amazing how much Western dentists have improved their techniques over the past 50 years. We owe them a big thank you for that. Traditional Chinese medicine is in a bit of a tough spot these days, surrounded by the overwhelming presence of Western medicine. Traditional Chinese medicine practitioners often find themselves having to defend traditional Chinese medicine and write articles to showcase its remarkable and beneficial aspects. But here's the thing that cracks me up: these articles defending traditional Chinese medicine actually try to use Western medicine's logical thinking to make their case. It's like a disastrous attempt to copy the opponent. You don't need to rely on Western medicine's logical theories to defend traditional Chinese medicine in front of Western medicine itself. That's just plain wrong. Traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine are like apples and oranges, two completely different sciences that should be appreciated and evaluated on their own terms. When it comes to comparing with Western medicine, traditional Chinese medicine has to answer 6 important questions. The first question is about the nature of traditional Chinese medicine. Is it a philosophical medicine or an empirical medicine? There are 2 different viewpoints on this. One perspective suggests that traditional Chinese medicine is purely a medical approach that relies on accumulated historical experience, making it purely empirical. If traditional Chinese medicine is seen in this light, it would be similar to Yao Medicine. Our Yao minority, Yao people have accumulated a wealth of experience in treating diseases over generations. They have discovered numerous plants and minerals in nature that are highly effective in treating illnesses. However, this knowledge is purely based on empirical evidence and historical accumulation. Can it be considered a scientific discipline? The conclusion is quite simple. Yao medicine is not a science, it is purely the accumulation of empirical knowledge. So, how did Yao medicine eventually rise to a scientific position? It was through the influence of traditional Chinese medicine. Traditional Chinese medicine incorporated the medicines and treatment methods used in Yao medicine into its theoretical framework, providing explanations within the scope of traditional Chinese medicine theory. Yao medicine transformed into systematic knowledge, transitioning from experience to knowledge, which Yao medicine itself could not achieve. In this way, many researchers in the field of traditional Chinese medicine have conducted extensive studies on Yao medicine prescriptions and herbal remedies, classifying them within the system of Chinese herbal medicine. By applying concepts such as cold and hot properties, treatment of deficiency or excess conditions, and using the principles of traditional Chinese medicine, the effectiveness of Yao medicine has been widely recognized and become more commonly used. Through the exploration of Yao medicine, traditional Chinese medicine also benefited and enriched its own theoretical framework and expanded its repertoire of herbal remedies. What am I trying to say with this? I disagree with labeling traditional Chinese medicine solely as empirical medicine. It has its own theoretical framework, and with the help of this framework, it has actually managed to enhance the practice of Yao medicine. Philosophical medicine. A real traditional Chinese medicine practitioner is like a philosopher who uses philosophy in this approach to medical treatment. Have you heard of dialectical treatment in traditional Chinese medical methodology? This is a prime example of how Chinese philosophy has been integrated into medical methodology. A true traditional Chinese medicine practitioner has a deep understanding of Chinese philosophy. When discussing diseases, they approach it with a philosophical perspective, which is why it is referred to as philosophical medicine. Now, you asked for my opinion. My view is that traditional Chinese medicine is not merely an empirical practice but rather a philosophical approach to medicine. This is the first significant issue that needs to be discussed. The second question that must be addressed is the teaching methods for training traditional Chinese medicine practitioners. How is traditional Chinese medicine cultivated? There is a choice between modern institutionalized education and the traditional method of master-apprentice transmission. In Chinese history, traditional Chinese medicine practitioners were traditionally trained through the master-apprentice relationship, where knowledge and skills were passed down from experienced practitioners to their apprentices. However, in modern times, the predominant choice has been the institutionalized education system. It may seem amusing to think about it. Let's take the example of a course called Traditional Chinese Medicine Diagnosis. If you score an A in this course after a semester, does that mean you can diagnose patients? I have personally studied the textbook on traditional Chinese medicine diagnosis, and I initially thought I could become proficient through self-study. When I was young, I wanted to become self-taught, so an old traditional Chinese medicine practitioner in the neighborhood told me to start by reading 2 books. He lent me a book called Traditional Chinese Medicine Diagnosis and another one called Introduction to Chinese Materia Medica. I was thrilled when I received the 2 books and I devoted myself day and night to studying them. I want to start by reading Traditional Chinese Medicine Diagnosis and then move on to Introduction to Chinese Materia Medica. It just makes sense to diagnose first and then prescribe medicine, right? How awesome! So, I opened up the Traditional Chinese Medicine Diagnosis tutorial and learned that there are 4 methods of traditional Chinese medicine diagnosis: observation, listening, questioning, and pulse taking. As I went through the chapters one by one, I finally reached the chapter on pulse taking. The first sentence of that chapter caught me off guard, the myriad of pulse patterns. I was wondering how on earth I would choose from so many pulse patterns. But then, the next sentence reassured me that although there are countless pulse patterns, they can be broadly categorized into around 20 or so types. The first type is called Hongmai, flooding pulse. It's described as being very forceful. When you use 3 fingers to feel the pulse and it jumps with great strength, that's a Hongmai. There's also a type called Huamai, slippery pulse, another called Xianmai, string-like pulse, and one called Seimai, rough pulse, as well as Qimai, slow pulse, and so on. In total, there are about 20 or so types. I diligently wrote down the definitions of each pulse pattern and pondered over them repeatedly, trying to understand the differences between them. I was eager to give it a try, so I asked my sister to extend her hand and let me feel her pulse to see what kind of pulse pattern she had. As soon as I placed my fingers on her pulse, my initial impression was that it was a Hongmai, jumping with great force. But after holding it for a little longer, it became a bit slippery, and then I noticed some string-like characteristics, as well as some slowness and roughness. I still couldn't pinpoint the exact pulse pattern. So, I went and asked this old Chinese medicine practitioner in our neighborhood, those traditional Shanghai neighborhoods. I told him, "Man, I've been studying for over a month, reading this whole book. But I still can't figure out how to take pulses." He chuckled and said, "I told you to read that book to get a basic understanding of traditional Chinese medicine theory, not to learn pulse taking. If you want to learn diagnosis, you gotta follow me. When I go see patients, you carry my bag. When I prescribe medicine, you copy the prescription." I was a bit annoyed after hearing all that. I mean, come on, I'm a young guy, and my face probably showed my disappointment. He could tell I wasn't happy about it. So, he added, "When we go see patients, who's gonna carry the bag, you or me?" I thought it should be me. I'm the apprentice, and it wouldn't be right for the master to carry the bag while I just stand there. So, I said, "I'll carry it, no problem." Then, he told me that when he takes the patient's pulse, I should also take it. But what kind of pulse would I get? He couldn't really explain it clearly, and there was no way for him to teach me. After he finished taking the pulse, he would prescribe the medicine. And when he did that, I had to copy the prescription. By copying the prescription, I would know what pulse he detected and what disease he diagnosed. Then, I would take the patient's pulse again, correcting any mistakes I made in the first reading. The whole point of copying the prescription was to learn from it. By copying what he wrote, I could understand what pulse he felt, and then I could take the pulse again. This process would repeat. I asked him, "How long does this repetition go on?" He replied, 10 years. Without 10 years, can you diagnose? Can you take pulses? It was impossible. I finally gave up. It's just not possible to become skilled in Chinese medicine through self-study. You have to learn from a master.